This is the last lesson of the Sketching Sparrow series. I haven't played around with charcoal for many years, and I decided to start experimenting with it this last year. And I found that it's been quite amazing because it's really extended what I do. In today's lesson, you'll start with making a wash of charcoal on the surface. And what's quite amazing about this technique is that it takes away the fear of the white paper, because once the marks are down, you actually have to deal with them. Then you will draw into that surface using both erasers and various charcoals. I hope you enjoy today's lesson. When I need to sharpen my charcoal, this is a piece of willow charcoal, I make sure that I sharpen it into a jar, and then the little pieces of charcoal or the dust that's resulting can be used to create liquid charcoal. To create liquid charcoal, all you do is you empty the charcoal dust into a pallet. You then add water to this dust. I generally add the water using a pipette, just because I can control the amount of water that I put into that charcoal dust. I then take a brush and give it a thorough mix, making sure that all the dust particles are liquid. I then apply that resulting mixture onto pieces of paper. I start off quite dark so that you'll see that the strokes on these pieces of paper are quite harsh to start off with, and then I later add strokes of charcoal that are a lot lighter. To ensure that the next strokes that I make on the piece of paper are lighter, I just make sure that I add quite a lot of water to the charcoal mix. I then work more marks onto the pieces of paper. I do like to prepare quite a few pieces of paper at one time, then I have a choice regarding which piece of paper I prefer or I would like to start working on. In terms of equipment for this lesson, you'll probably need something that you can use to smudge the charcoal. You can either use some stiff oil brushes or you can use compressed paper, and they're often called pastel smudges. I'll be using probably a mixture of willow charcoal, and then this is a bit of compressed charcoal. I've got a whole lot here as well, just little sticks of charcoal. I'll be using various erasers, including a kneaded eraser. So this is just one of those kneaded erasers. I quite like using the Tombow erasers. I've got one that's got a wedge shape that's lovely for drawing, and then this one that's quite fine. In addition to that, I'll probably be using a charcoal pencil. And then this is something that I discovered recently. It's called, I think it's a crayon of sorts, but it's called Thundersoft. So it's quite nice for drawing into and creating detail in a charcoal drawing. The reference that I'm going to use today has been inspired by a friend that I've made on Instagram. This little sparrow has been rescued by a family and they are rearing it. The writing is in Chinese, but I think they've called this little sparrow Eagle. So yeah, a lovely thing to honor this little bird with this art lesson. When I first looked at the bits of paper that I had made with this wash of charcoal dust, I turned it around and I just had a look at areas that I wanted to cover and areas, I thought of working maybe vertically, and then I thought I quite like this This is a lovely mark that I'd like to retain, and I don't mind working over areas like that. So I think the sparrow's head's going to fit in here somewhere, and then I'm probably going to rub into a lot of that. And I love these sort of sweeping marks at the bottom there. So I'm going to start with the Tombow Mono Zero eraser with this shape on it. And I'm going to just start drawing into that charcoal. So the beak shape, I'm just trying to basically work out where this sparrow is going to fit in. And then I'm just going to go in and start focusing in on that head. And I'm going to use the piece of vine charcoal that I started out with. So just working in values. And then softening that drawing with the pastel smudger. And I picked up the really tiny Mono Zero eraser. And a lot of this technique will be about rubbing away, drawing, rubbing away again. When I use this Tombow Zero eraser, I try to see it as a drawing tool, and I use it to make marks into the object or the form that I'm drawing. I shift back to a stick of willow charcoal, and I work back into the beak and into the head of the sparrow, re-establishing the value and working up lines, working up areas or patches, shapes of value on the head of that little sparrow. Love that sweep. I almost don't want to lose too much of that because it sort of suggests wings, so I don't really want to work over it. There is a line in the reference that runs through that area, so I think what I might do is just get a ruler and work a line in there. This is almost like the wipe away technique that I used in the previous lesson. The vine charcoal is probably the most forgiving, so it might be a good idea to stick to the vine charcoal as long as possible and then move on to the darker charcoals. The darker charcoals. In this part of the drawing, I shift from charcoal to the smudger, pushing the charcoal back, then working back into it with the mono eraser, going back to the willow charcoal, establishing edges, shapes, starting to work into the wing. I also use my chisel-shaped Tombow eraser, and I work up the value of the background using a charcoal pencil. This charcoal pencil is quite dark. It's darker than the willow charcoal, so it gives me quite a nice, rich value in the background. I don't want to lose that beak in the darkness of the background that I've just established, so I use the zero mono eraser to re-establish and make that head stick out from the background. I photographed the drawing and zoomed in so that you can see the mark making and the decisions I've made in this drawing so far. There's quite a lot of detail on this beak. I'm not sure if I'm going to put everything in. At this part of the drawing, I work at really intensifying the darkest blacks, working on the background, working on the eye of the little bird, and working on the back of the head. Switching between charcoal pencil to the pastel smudger and then back to the willow charcoal. I can't decide whether I want to have this just bleeding into the background or whether I want to define it a bit more. It's a piece of compressed charcoal, and I just like the mark it makes. It's making like sort of quite a square solid mark, but I think I'm going to work that in a bit. And I've got the kneadable eraser here, and I think I'm just going to pick up some of this. Also quite a nice eraser for suggesting and making marks. The stiff brush that I showed you earlier can also be used to work and spread the charcoal in areas. In this part of the drawing, I use the wedge-shaped mono eraser to create marks that look like feathers and also to add highlights. I also work with the Thunder Soft darkening pencil to create areas of detail and linear interest. I go back to the willow charcoal to build up the mid-tones on the wings, suggest the tail and the feet. I've indicated the wing, just roughly drawn it in, and a suggestion of the tail, and then the feet. I think I'm going to keep the feet and the tail quite minimal and maybe just build up that wing and focus on that wing. I think this mark is a little bit strange, so I might get quite a hard eraser and try and rub into it and just soften it because it does look a bit odd. I don't mind all the other drips, but this one is just quite strange looking. In this segment, I work with the kneadable eraser, the mono eraser, and the pastel smudger to both lighten and soften areas. With these little feet, I'm working in the negative space, just so that I don't have to work too much detail. And to them, I'm going to leave them quite white. There is a sweeping mark that extends past the foot of the bird. I'm going to intensify it so that the bird's body stands out more. I seem to be having disasters with the end part of my filming, so I'll just walk you through what I did. I used jelly rolls and I made some marks in the eyes just to emphasize that eye area. I also worked a little bit into this area just to highlight that. I then took the Posca marker and worked some lines up here and on the beak, a few lines on the wings. If I made a line, I then softened it with my finger so that it got the smudgy effect rather than a very definite mark. I put a little bit of Posca at the bottom here. I don't really want to work too much more into this bird because I think that the suggestiveness of it is quite nice. I think I have focused on the head and I've focused on the wings and a tiny bit on that leg. Otherwise, I think it's quite nice, just suggestive and expressive. I hope you enjoyed working with charcoal as much as I did. Please go to the Instagram page of the little sparrow that we used today as a reference. The parents of this sparrow have a whole collection of videos and images that are just absolutely charming. Every time I do a little drawing of their sparrow, I tag them in it, and they are most grateful. So please tag them and tag me in the drawing that you post online. I can't wait to see what you do.